Hello everyone, and welcome back to Tabletop Tavern Tips. Today, on this episode of D&D Advice, we're taking on a Herculean task. I found a thread of Critical Role hot takes and unpopular opinions. And while I wasn't necessarily surprised by what I saw, I was profoundly disappointed. Like, seriously, if you think Laura Bailey is a bad voice actress, I don't really know what to tell you. Some of these takes come from what I believe to be the lowest common denominator of human intelligence. However, there were a few that were salvageable. And not only can we learn some interesting lessons about Critical Role, but maybe some interesting lessons about how to play Dungeons & Dragons and run the game. Who knows? But without further ado, let's dive in to the best of the worst of the Critical Role hot takes and unpopular opinions. Let's get started. Alright, first up. They made me never want to hear the word guidance ever again after the first half of Bell's Hells being split. Honestly, after the first few sessions, I was ready to never hear the word guidance again. I don't think this is the fault of the Critical Role cast. This is the fault of the game Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition for having something like guidance in the sandbox. Guidance is something that can be spammed, that offers a flat benefit, and that players will use if the opportunity arises. Now, obviously, there are times where you can absolutely split players off so that they don't do this. However, guidance spam is going to be part of your games if you have a player with access to that spell. Again, flat benefit that you can just use. So, get ready to hear a lot of guidance if you have the spell in your games. This might be a hot take, but I actually think it's okay for DMs to put the gavel down on spells if they don't think they fit into the sandbox. For me, it's Counterspell and Spare the Dying, two spells that no longer have a role in my game's sandbox with the homebrew mechanics that we've introduced over the years. They're irrelevant, so my players don't pick them because they're not needed. So I just take the spells off the list so new players don't accidentally pick them in the games that I run. If you don't want guidance in your games because you're getting annoyed with it, I think that that's okay. You just need to clarify that at session 0. If you want to rebalance the spell with your party's permission, I think that's okay too. I think it's okay to discuss with your players mid-game on how a spell is working out at the table. If something's too overpowered, if something is too weak, changes are alright. People pretend like this kind of thing is like unacceptable, a crime against rules as written, but frankly, like who cares? You know, if something is not fun at the table, change it, you know? Experiment, try things out. You're not breaking any rules, no D&D police are coming to arrest you. Alright, if guidance is bothering you, I think that's perfectly valid. The cast think they want a gray story. They can't play a gray story. Nowhere is this more evident as it is in Campaign 2. Just presenting something as gray does not make something interesting. The choosing is what makes it interesting. Hard agree on this one, though I think Matt is usually the one who pushes the gray narrative, whereas the players just want something a bit more simple. And by the way, there were some people in the thread saying like, this is proof that they don't know proper storytelling, as if a morally gray story is the only kind of good story out there. Guys, look, I don't think every story needs to be morally gray. My campaigns are not morally gray at all. My players are fighting straight up evil baddies, and they kill them with the good guys. That's the game. That's the story. And you know what? That's okay for me. There's a good side and a bad side. Lord of the Rings is a pretty black and white story most of the time. There are gray elements and deeper parts of the morality of Tolkien's writing, obviously. But for the most part, you know, Sauron is the bad guy. The orcs are the bad guys. If you want to play that out, I think that's fine as long as the players are also okay with it. I think Matt does want a gray story. As this person said, Campaign 2 made this evident. There was the Dwendalian Empire and the Kreen dynasty, and the players very decidedly sided with the Kreen. And the Kreen very rapidly became the good guys in the majority of that conflict, with the Dwendalian Empire being portrayed as mostly evil. And you know what? Was I disappointed that this became less of a Game of Thrones style political intrigue conflict? Yeah, but the loss of that was not really that big of a deal because the cast are really good at playing off their characters, and I was still having a really good time. At the end of the day, I actually think gray stories can be really bad a lot of the time. You know, there's complexity there, and complexity is harder to pull off than simplicity. And I think a lot of people who try to do gray stories really mess them up, right? I've tried it too, and it's not easy, okay? It's okay to do something simple if you want to pull off something simple. If you want that for your games, I think that's good. Here's a lighthearted one. I don't think Taliesin should play melee characters. Whenever he gets close to half health, he starts making decisions like he's one turn away from permadying, and it's not an Ashton thing. I noticed it in Campaign 2 as well. Leftover stress from Mollymauk, I suppose. Now, this is a hot take about a player who's being really cautious in combat because they experienced player character death earlier. And you know what? Again, I don't really see this as a super big deal. This is going to come up a lot in the video, but as a viewer of Critical Role, this is obviously not, related to Dungeons & Dragons, really, just my way of watching the show. I don't really overanalyze the kind of things players are doing in combat. At least I rarely do. I've been annoyed with decisions made by the cast before, but never to the point where I want to, shut off the show and rage to my friends about how stupid something is. At the end of the day, it's a D&D game that I'm not even in. I'm in it for the story, right? And if the story's good, I really don't care. So, I don't really get how people get so uppity over Critical Role combat. Some people in Twitch chat pretend like the world is ending if not every single decision is perfectly optimal. And honestly, even though I would prefer to have optimal decisions be made, especially as a guy who runs a really hardcore game, at the same time, I also understand that I'm not running this game. I'm not part of this game. This is a different game from what I play, and so I'm not the kind of guy who cares when Taliesin retreats in combat. In my games, personally, this is actually a pretty reasonable move. In my combats, things can turn south really quickly. One failed save, one wrong move can result in you losing a lot of hit points. Villains have access to extremely powerful abilities, especially at the top of the round in combat, that adds a lot to the fight and adds new threats onto the field. This can drastically shift things. So, if you're at half health early in the combat, retreating back to the healers to get healing is not totally crazy. Now, Matt doesn't run combat like me, not exactly, but his combats can be difficult, and so Taliesin retreating is really not that big of a deal to me. I do think that when you are playing D&D, caution is not horrible, but at the same time, there is a degree of boldness that is required. If you never take bold action, often action is not taken at all, and that might be a detriment for the rest of your players. Taliesin's character in this campaign is a barbarian, a tank, and therefore a tank running away is, it's not exactly ideal, right? But again, like I said, even if it's not exactly ideal, it does depend on the game that you're playing. I know in my game, this is going to be more logical. In Matt's game, maybe less so. In your game, I don't know. It depends on how you run it. Playing suboptimally is fine, but my god is FCG probably the worst built character I've ever seen. It is beyond frustrating to see how much he fails at things that should be super easy for his cleric build. Like I said earlier, I really don't get the beef over someone else's character not being perfectly optimized in a game that I'm not in, even as a viewer. And even though FCG, he fails skill checks, I don't notice him failing skill checks that I think are imperative to the plot, and therefore, I don't really care. This is a discussion, however, over sub-optimized characters. In my games, personally, sub-optimized characters would not fit, but Critical Role is not my game. The only thing that matters is that you discuss what kind of game you're running beforehand. If you're running a game where perfect optimization is not required, then that's the kind of game you're running. I know a lot of people get really, really upset when they see a character that is not built properly. But honestly, it's not your game, man. And if somebody fails skill checks more often than they should because they don't have the perfect stat spread, yeah, for me as a dungeon master, that would be kind of whack because I'm used to characters with a really solid spread of stats. But at the same time, if it's not my game, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to be saying that a lot throughout this thread. In fact, throughout this entire thread, this is something I could say for a lot of people. If it's not my game, I really don't care. The only thing I really care about with Critical Role as a viewer is the plot. The game elements, that's the player, that's the DM. That's how D&D works in general. If you are running a game where suboptimal characters are welcome, tell your players that. If you're running a game where suboptimal characters wouldn't fit, definitely tell your players that. That is a mandatory thing in Session 0. What kind of game are you running, and what kind of characters do you want for it? FCG wouldn't fit in my game, but I think he fits fine into Matt's. Not a fan of Imogen and Laudna, and because people are probably going to assume the worst, no, it's not because of it being lesbian. Their relationship just feels really one-dimensional, like they came to the party already extremely close, so everyone expects them to be together. Yeah, Imogen and Laudna got together because they're really close. How do you think people get together? Because they hate each other? My god. What sort of toxic relationships do we want in media these days? I liked Imogen and Laudna a lot because they weren't a toxic relationship, because they were already close, and because they clearly liked each other. It was cute to see them slowly build that more than friendship dynamic. I liked that. Now, I actually wanted to pick this one because I have a real hot take. The real hot take being that I think Imogen and Laudna should have been together from the beginning. In my Imadna video from February, I think I talked about this, where I thought that Imogen and Laudna should have been a couple from session 1. This is a dynamic that I think is rarely explored in Dungeons & Dragons. Often in D&D, romance is framed through friends to lovers. This is how Critical Role has done almost every single one of their relationships. Friends to lovers trope, which I think is fine. Friends to lovers is a really common trope for a reason. It works really, really well. But I want to see a couple that already exists, that's already pre-established, that are already romantically together, whether they be boyfriend and girlfriend, or they are wife and wife, whatever, who cares? If they're together already, I want to see how that relationship will endure throughout a campaign. Having a married couple or a couple that's already together endure the rigors of adventure, I think is interesting from day one. I have never had this in any of my games personally, but I wanted to open that up. I was actually thinking that Imogen and Laudna would be that open door to that idea. I thought that they were already together from session 1, and when they confirmed that they were just friends at the beginning of the campaign, I was honestly shocked and a little disappointed. I thought this would be an interesting dynamic that is rarely explored in Dungeons & Dragons, and that's rarely explored at tables, but you know, I am happy with how they got together, and I'm looking forward to see how this relationship continues and progresses over the course of the campaign. I just wanted to point out that Imogen and Laudna could have been an example of something different, and hey, just because they're not that example doesn't mean you can't be. In your own games, maybe start a pre-established relationship. Maybe the DM creates you a spouse NPC. Perhaps your spouse is one of the other player characters if they're comfortable with that, you know? Could be an interesting thought. Who knows? Fans seem crazy AF. Yeah. But, and this is relevant to this channel because we discuss RPG horror stories, look, this is the truth. This isn't me giving a hot take, this is just a fact. Every single fandom that gets big enough, even somewhat big, hell, doesn't even need to be that big, they're gonna have a lot of toxic fans. That's just the truth. People talk about Critical Role like it is some insane exception to the rule, and it's not. Critical Role has toxic fans just like every single other fandom I have ever been a part of in my life. I know someone's gonna jump in the comments, what about the parasociality, Crispy? What about the parasocial relationship that fans have with the cast? Doesn't that make Critical Role special and different? No, it doesn't. Have you ever been a fan of a YouTuber? Have you ever seen a Twitch stream before? Like seriously, anyone with any sort of presence on the internet has parasocial fans. I have parasocial fans. I only have 45,000 subscribers, man, and I need to deal with people sending me very strange things in my inbox. It's part of the gig at this point. And look, unfortunately, there's not really much I can do about it. I say it's bad, and, you know, I move on with my life. I can't control the way people perceive me. You know, maybe some days I wish I could, but I can't. That's just the way it is. Am I trying to say that toxic fans are good or okay? No, of course not. I'm just trying to say that Critical Role isn't really different from any other big fandom. Sometimes you just gotta accept that not everything is going to be perfect all the time. Hell, on this channel, we read tons of horror stories about TTRPGs, games that we love here. However, does that mean that TTRPGs suck, that D&D sucks, that Critical Role sucks, that all of these fandoms and all of these audiences, that they're all terrible people who are irredeemably awful? No, it just means that some people suck. There are plenty of other great people out there. Hell, in this very community, so many people came to this channel because of Critical Role. Ginny D, an amazing YouTuber who has grown super big in this space, and many other YouTubers like her, their first stepping stone was talking about Critical Role. This fandom has done some really great things, just like how some fans have done horrible things and said horrible things. At the end of the day, toxicity is going to be part of some fandoms. I mean, for the love of God, I play Apex Legends. I play Destiny, alright? You think I haven't experienced toxic fans before? Critical Role is not different, alright? There's going to be toxicity, but that doesn't mean that the good things don't exist too. Just like how RPG horror stories don't stop RPGs from being awesome, there's going to be good memories. There's going to be bad memories. And you know what? I think I'm okay with that. Woof! Some of these hot takes, they drain me. This thread was crazy, but I hope you guys enjoyed and learned a few lessons on the way. If you guys did, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out our RPG Horror Story series, where we cover the best of the worst of TTRPGs. And while you're there in the cards, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down into the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment, the good and the bad, to let me know you made it to the end of the video. And that's like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.